Hi, welcome back. My name's Adam Kayfitz, and I'm a psychologist who works with parents, families, and children. If you're returning and watching this next video, thanks so much for coming back, and I hope you found the first one informative. If you happen to be new to this video series, then welcome. When parents are bringing their kids to come and see me, oftentimes, whether they say it or not, there can be some level of shame. We're parents and we really care. And when we care and we see that there's challenges and struggles, it's very normal for us to sometimes wonder, is it our fault? This is a challenge for us to look at ourselves out of curiosity, out of self growth, out of self learning, not out of judging ourselves, blaming ourselves. There's a long history in mental health and psychology where parents have been blamed. And that's really unfair. Anytime that anybody is kind of under a tyrannical, you're bad approach, that makes it really hard to change. So when I'm talking about our own emotion regulation, it's with love, it's with care, it's with saying we can improve, we can get better at our own skills. And if we can do that, it's going to make a massive difference with our kids. About 68% of us come from securely attached families, but the rest of us don't. There's a lot of history about our parents, and they do the best that they can do. But sometimes we get messages like, don't cry over spilled milk. So we learn, don't cry. You get what you get and you don't get upset. Just accept it. Just take it. Don't get upset. These messages are just embedded within our culture. When then our child is upset, those models could be triggered in our brain. If that gets triggered in our brain, it's more difficult for us, not because we're trying to be anything but helpful and loving to our kids, but it can be more difficult for us to then be able to respond and be empathic and soothing to our kids. And we can carry a lot of shame about that, right? Sometimes as parents, we get overly angry. Sometimes we yell. Sometimes we scream. Sometimes we shut down. Sometimes we run away. Sometimes we pull the blanket over our head and don't want to deal. We have our own emotional reactions. This is not bad parenting. This is simply our own nervous systems being overwhelmed by the emotions that our children are having. So, for example, suppose you create a perfect day for your kid. You go to a water park, a theme park. You get them cotton candy. They get to have Coke and Pop. They get to have sugar, all these wonderful things. And on the way out of the park, they see a game and they want to be able to play that game. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry, sweetie. No. Big emotional reaction. This is terrible. This day is horrible. You're the worst parent in the world. Most of us, or many of us, has been in that situation. That's their big emotion. They don't like being told no. But then it triggers inside of our own brain if we can't manage it and just say, I know, you're really mad. You're angry. I know, you couldn't get to play your game. We had a great day, but it wasn't perfect and it's not what you want. And I'm really sorry. To do that, to be regulated enough to do that, we have to actually manage the fact that our kid's really pissed at us, which is fine, and they're sad. And we have to face those feelings of sadness. But if we struggle ourselves to be able to manage sadness or to be able to manage anger, it's really difficult to give a response that can then help our kids to regulate their emotions and their feelings. I wanted to talk about how there can be characteristic parent styles in a fun way. This comes from emotion focused family therapy, okay? And they're just emotional styles that we can have a look at. So, some of us as parents, when we get really activated by our kids, or when our kids are having emotions, when they're bullied, when things are not going well for them, we can have emotional responses that we would call kind of like a jellyfish. Okay. And a jellyfish is where our own emotional system, it's really big. There's nothing wrong with us having emotions and feelings, but it's almost as though we have a hard time containing it and modulating it. So it becomes kind of this big, diffuse level of energy. If our kid gets bullied, we might get so angry towards that bully. I can't believe it, I did that. I'm going to get that kid. It's a little more unregulated, kind of like a jellyfish response. Or when there's sadness that our kids have, it's okay to be sad. I'm so sad. That's awful. As opposed to feeling as though we are dissolving into a puddle of tears. This is not a judgment. at all. It's just how well we learn to cope with our feelings is going to have an influence on this. Our emotion styles are also partially influenced by the amount of stress we have. The more stress we have, the harder things are going. This is going to be more difficult for us to do. So it's not as though we have an absolute emotional style. The jellyfish is one characteristic style that we can have a look at, because if we are responding like jellyfish emotionally to our kids' emotions, that's going to influence them in terms of their emotional system. Some kids may model or mimic or pick up on that style, and then they're going to have much bigger emotional responses. But some kids may, in response to the big jellyfish emotions of the parents, say, geez, my feelings hurt my parent, and I love them, and I don't want to do that. And then they start to learn a process of shutting down and not sharing their emotions. We ask them, hey, how was your day? Fine. Any problems? Nope. Things are good. They tend to shut it down, and then that becomes a process for how they're actually regulating their own emotions. They learn to figure it out by themselves unless we're able to teach them. Another emotional style is that of an ostrich. An ostrich is someone that doesn't actually pay attention to emotion. They tend to be more practical. They tend to go towards logic-based solutions. Hey, mom. Hey, dad. I'm being bullied. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to stand up to the bully. We're going to go to the guidance counselor to get you a counseling appointment. And we're going to talk to the principal. And we're going to make sure that the bully never does it again. It's very practical. There's nothing inherently wrong with that response. It just doesn't pay attention to the emotion. The thing that's really interesting about jellyfish and about ostriches is each response tends to be anxiety in us about the emotion. In the jellyfish, it's sort of a diffuse emotional response. And in an ostrich, it tends to be a more shut down response. It's actually an anxious response. It's not that we don't have emotions and feelings if we're an ostrich. It's just that something about it is kind of threatening. We've learned to not pay attention to it, and we just go to practical. Depending on the emotional style of your kid, that might work and it may not work. Because maybe you have a really empathic kid and they're going to feel shut down, even though all you're doing is trying to help them. So we can see that the interactional style and emotional style that we have and the emotional style of our kids works together in this complex interplay. And that's going to have an influence in terms of how our kids grow and develop their own skills.